Hey, Rising Church, welcome to another session of Groves. I hope you guys had a great discussion as you kind of started kicking things off. And again, as you continue getting to know each other better. This past weekend, if a lot of you know that a lot of us guys, we went away on our Virginia Rising Adventures trip. And it's just such a great time to bond together and connect that you just can't do on a Sunday morning. And that's what I love about Groves. But one of the hikes we did, and we talked about this past Sunday, was called Old Rag. And I think one of the things that a lot of the men really enjoyed about this particular hike at Shenandoah National Park was that it kind of had this whole section, a mile of just these boulders and rocks you kind of had to climb under and over and around. And there was kind of these little arrows, these little flashes that were on the rocks that would kind of point you in the right direction. But for like a mile, it was just, they were jumping around like a bunch of middle school boys yelling out parkour as they jumped from rock to rock and kind of found their way through this labyrinth. And it kind of reminds me of the story I want to share with you today, which is another national park as we kind of make this tour of national parks around the U.S. and try to take some of the lessons or the stories or the locations and kind of apply them to our faith. And this one happens to be at Arches National Park. If you don't know where that one is, it's in Utah, in eastern Utah, in Moab, right next to Canyonlands, which we've talked about before. But Arches is kind of a special park. It's actually the highest concentration of natural arches in the entire world. There's over 2,000 arches within this park, and you kind of really see the main ones. There's like a main 20, I guess, that you kind of really go see. And so I got to see a lot of arches. I think on that day I ended up hiking 18 plus miles on multiple hikes. I'm starting off with this one, which you may recognize from the Utah license plate. This one's called Delicate Arch because it's massive and it's huge and it's beautiful and it's kind of all by itself, but it's super delicate in the sense like this thing's going down any year, it seems like. I mean, it's just like barely supported by like a little bit. And at some point, just like all the arches in Arches National Park, they're not going to last forever because erosion, which created the arches, is also going to end up destroying the arches. And so you kind of get to see all these arches in kind of various stages of life, if you will. And delicate's pretty delicate. And so you kind of got to go see these things when you can. In fact, some of them have fallen over the last, 50 years and so, or broken into smaller and smaller pieces. In fact, there's one called Landscape Arch, and this thing is so long. I mean, it's like as long as a football field, I think, 100 yards across, and it's just a sliver, and you're looking at it going, how on earth is this thing defying gravity and able to withstand? But it's not going to last forever. And so that alone is a lesson in of itself. One of the ones from Psalm 90, I believe, is the one where it talks about, hey, our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures, but the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. If only we knew the power of your anger, your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due, which is what we're going to be talking about this next Sunday, by the way. But it says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. It's like we're not going to last forever like the arches, so teach us to number our days and do what we should be doing, following you, our shepherd, for the days we have and accomplishing your plans and your desires for our lives. And as we talked about on Sunday, sometimes the plans and the ways that God guides us and leads us, it's not always towards great, fun, happy, woohoo stuff. Sometimes he does lead us into difficult situations and difficult places and hardship, into the valleys, the darkness of the valleys and these challenges, the shadow of death that we talked about on Sunday. And so kind of on this one hike that I did in Arches, which had nothing to do with arches, which is kind of funny, but it was called the Fiery Furnace. And it's the idea that sometimes God leads us into a fiery furnace for his greater plans and purposes, which we may not see in the moment, but we usually can see in the rearview mirror. But on this one particular hike, it's called Fiery Furnace because it's kind of like this labyrinth. It's all these stones and kind of, all these rocks, kind of like the Old Rag times 100. And you have to just kind of find your way through all these little canyons and all these little rivets and all these, holes and different things all the way through this maze. And it's actually, you're not allowed to do it on your own. You have to get a special permit to do it, and they only give out 80 a day. They do have a couple of ranger-led hikes where you kind of go with the ranger because it's so easy to get lost in there. But if you have good navigational skills, you can apply to get one of these 80 permits, and you actually have to go to the ranger station and like watch a whole course, like a 15-minute video to get the sign off on you being able to even go into this place. And so, I got my reservation. I was super excited to go in there by myself and test out my navigational skills. And luckily, I have AllTrails on my phone because on AllTrails, you can download the map and it can kind of show you where you are in the labyrinth, because there were so many times where I'm like, I have no idea where I am or where I'm going. And it's just kind of, you just go explore, and you have to remember, if I go up this chute and I try to climb up these rocks and go up this crevice, I got to find my way back here so that I can keep going. And so, I mean, there were several times when I'm like looking at my app going, it was supposed to be a 2.1 mile hike if you stay on the loop, and mine was like 5 miles because I just kept going off on all these little chutes and exploring and coming back down. So it was a great time. But when I was in the middle of this hike, I actually parked myself. And when I look back at my journal, I realized that one of the things I just kept repeating over and over and over again as I was making my way through this labyrinth, not knowing where I was going, was Psalm 23. And just repeating over and over and over again, this idea that you will guide me on the right path for your name's sake. Get me through this and get me out of here. And he will get me through the darkest valley because he is with me, and I'm not alone. Even though I am alone, I'm not alone because he is with me. And when I was there, I actually sat down and read a story you're probably familiar with. It's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you don't know the story, they're kind of in exile. They've been taken as prisoners, exiles from Jerusalem to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar's the king. And so these three kind of like rise up with Daniel in the system, and they're, given privilege and given power and authority because they just prove themselves to be so worthy. And at one point, the king makes this decree that everybody's got to bow down to this golden idol and worship it. And these guys refuse. And so they get into trouble. And so the king, according to the decree that he made, says, I'm going to throw you into the fiery furnace. And obviously you're going to die in there. The thing is so hot, you're going to burn up in this fiery furnace. And you probably know the story. They go into the furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar looks in, and there's a fourth person in the fire with them. He's like, who's that? And how come they're not all getting burned up? There was another in the fire. Maybe you know the song. They come out, and King Nebuchadnezzar's like, obviously your king is better than, or your God is higher than our God, because no God could do what we just saw. And so he, elevates these guys, even though he was about to have them executed, they are instead elevated. And so there's kind of this idea that sometimes God leads us into the fiery furnace, and it's for a greater purpose than just our comfort. And sometimes he leads us into dark places and difficult situations and hard places because there's something in it for us, but there also might be something for somebody else. In this case, it was Nebuchadnezzar and this witness to all the people in Babylon that the God of Israel is greater than the gods of Babylon. Kind of reminds me, you've probably heard this passage before, but in James chapter 1, verse 2, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith, it produces perseverance." Hupomeno, the ability to bear up under the weight. It makes you stronger. And it says, let perseverance finish its work, what it's trying to do, the perseverance through the trials and difficulties and the valleys and the darkness. Produces perseverance, for perseverance finish its work, or let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. What's the goal? The goal is for us to become mature and complete. And sometimes we cannot become mature and complete, become what God desires to become, unless we are tested, unless we go through the fire, unless we go through the difficulty, unless we spend some time walking through the valley of the shadow of death or in the darkness. And when we persevere and we keep going and we realize that he is with us through that, and we come out on the other side, that's when we get to see the glory. As we're going through the valleys, up the mountain, and we finally make it out of the valley and up to the mountain peak, that's where we get to see the glory of God, and we get to see his provision. It's like that's what develops perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. That's Romans 5. That's what happens. And so what you're going to be talking about today is maybe, a little bit of, is it possible and true that God sometimes leads us into difficult situations because he knows that it's going to result in us being more mature and stronger and more faithful and more confident on the other side? That's a hard thing for us to grasp. We may not like that, but that's often what we need, and that's what the fiery furnace is for, and that's why he is with us in the fiery furnace. That's why he's with us when we're in the valley of the shadow of death, or the darkest valley. He is with us. He's amongst us. He's not just calling out from in front of us saying, come over here. He's like actually with us in those moments, because he knows that when we get to the other side and when we get through it, through the valley, that glory awaits and his greater plans and purposes will prevail. It's interesting because you think about the Daniel story, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Jeremiah is writing from Jerusalem to the exiles in Babylon. And Jeremiah 29, which is a passage I think most of us are familiar with, at least verse 11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and future. But we take that out of the context of when it's written. And when it's written as a letter to the exiles from Jeremiah in Jerusalem to them in Babylon. And he says this in verse 5. He says, hey, build houses, settle down, plant gardens, eat what they produce, marry and have sons and daughters, find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you, Babylon. Pray to Yahweh for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Listen to what he says next. He says, yes, this is what Yahweh Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have as you tell them to tickle your ears. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares Yahweh. Because what they were doing is they wanted them to tell them, hey, we're only going to be here for a little while, and then God's going to deliver us immediately out of this furnace. And God's like, you're not going to get delivered out of this furnace for a while. You're going to be there for a while. So settle down and buckle up and seek the prosperity of the place you're in, because the prophets who are telling you everything's going to be hunky-dory and great are not sent by me. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place. He's like, you're going to be here for 70 years. Entire generation. For I know the plans I have for you, declares Yahweh, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. Then you will seek me and find me. When you seek me with all your heart, I will be found by you, declares Yahweh, and will bring you back from captivity. I just think there's something about us understanding that there will be times when we're in the fiery furnace. There will be times when we are in the dark valleys. And even then, we have to put our hope and trust in him that he is with us and he will deliver us out of it at the right time. And he will put us in a place where we will be glorified in that sense if we will endure and be patient and have perseverance. So hopefully that's an encouraging word for you as you guys kind of break that apart and kind of discuss some of those ideas and really hopefully kind of sharpen each other as we kind of think about this idea of where God often leads us. So thanks, and hope you guys have a great discussion.